Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome back to the final podcast of season 24-25 for the Since I Was Young podcast for all things Heart of Midlothian. It's taken quite a bit of time. Was it agents have been involved, but they have managed to get us all in the same room for the first time this season, which is fantastic to have you boys on the board as well. And for all you guys watching at home or on your the phones as well, we do hope you enjoy this last episode. Obviously, it's going to be quite a wide covered topics for this afternoon. Obviously, we're going to be going through the season as a whole. Obviously, there's a lot more lows than there was highs, but nonetheless, we will go through it and have a wee bit of an in-depth chat. In terms of the team as well, we'll go through a tiny bit about any kind of standout players. Most notably the shite players as well, we will let the call it and all. And we'll also have a quick game of the keep or sell in terms of what we know so far in terms of the the coming players and the players that have already left the squad. So that'll be fun as well. We'll also touch a wee bit about the Tony Bloom investment, more specifically about the first vote that has went through and unanimously passed with over 98%. So we'll obviously move on to the next stage about that. We'll obviously touch on again about our brand new head coach, Derek McInnes as well. And lastly, we will end on a fantastic game of a quiz, which most notably I will not be a part of. So it'll be fun to see John and Alan squirm away while they figure the answers. So as always, guys, I'm sure that the boys as well will want to touch on it as well. But a massive sort of personal thank you from me and from all of us as well. I know that in terms of the podcast itself, it's been a bit of a change and switch in terms of how we've done them. At the podcast every week. Obviously, there have been ones where it's just maybe been myself and Alan. There's been ones where it's been Alan and John. It's been mostly Alan, let's say, because he's been keeping this the podcast going as well, but also John as well has been there to help as well throughout the times that I've not been available as well. So from me, like personally, in terms of all the views and all the new engagement and all the new subscribers as well, it's generally this season in particular has felt as if we've actually made a progress as well. So yeah, absolutely massive thank you to you all, and I'm sure that the guys will want to share the same sentiment as myself as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've spoken about it often enough, how this podcast kind of started, and without going through all the old stories and all the things that I've mentioned every other week when I've been talking about it, I don't think you or I kind of thought that it would get to where it is now. And obviously, it's amazing to be there and to kind of carry along. I don't know what it says about me that I've been free pretty much every weekend to do one of these. So maybe I need to get a bit more of a social life. But yeah, like I echo your sentiments completely. It's great, in the last few months have been, despite the misery of the on-field Heart of Midlothian, the podcast has started to thrive, and it's quite a proud moment. I feel like a proud dad, which is very odd to say that, but yeah. So yeah, I'll echo your thanks and appreciation for people, and hopefully we can continue to roll it forward.
Yeah, 100%. I'll back both of you on that. What does it say about me, Alan, that I spend most of my waking hours during the week on standby, just in case you need me? It's been great to be part of and increasingly be part of all season. The progress you guys have made in the first couple of years has been fantastic, and this season has been notable. You've had 2 episodes go over the 1,000 view mark, which is something I don't think either of you really expected to see happen anytime soon.
Not a one.
Yeah, massive shout out goes out to every single person that has watched a single episode, listened on Spotify. A special thanks again to those who checked out the solo episode I did a couple of weeks ago and were very kind and very cordial in their feedback and comments. Yeah, a great season for the podcast. Maybe not for the club, but we're going to get into that.
Absolutely. But yeah, as always, guys, as well, if you want to continue all the good things that be going on as well, please feel free to check out both the YouTube and the Spotify page, as John just mentioned there. And as always, we are on all the social media apps as well. You name it, we're all there. So all the links will be in the description. So please feel free to check those out. Right, boys, let's get into the negatives. So obviously, as well as both yourselves have mentioned, it's been a bit of a whirlwind in terms of this season itself. Technically, 4 managers in the space of one season. That's obviously not been heard of since the was it the good old Vlad times as well. So I guess obviously it's always a good place to start at the beginning, but just to kind of put a wee bit of a twist on that, and obviously in terms of where we are now in terms of the Tony Bloom investment, new head coach, and then Derek McInnes as well, new players coming in, all their players out the door as well. Where are your feelings at just now in terms of after the season's been done? John, I can start with yourself, because obviously you went in depth in terms of when you did your solo episode as well, a bit about Anne Budge as well, and that also remains to be seen as well as to where she's going to stand or not stand, like in the fair the distant future. So what are your feelings overall in terms of everything that's happened throughout the last few weeks, and ergo the horrible season that we have just experienced as well?
There's a lot of reasons to be excited for Hearts fans, I think. The combination of Derek McInnes coming in the door, everything he has said so far since he got in, a couple of the signings that we've already started making. Very positive outlook ahead of that in terms of the coaching side. Tony Bloom's investment has been passed by the vote. I'm not quite sure what the next step in that will be, but hopefully in the very near future we're going to see that significant financial boost, which will be only positive for Hearts. He has a track record as well of everywhere he has gone, he has improved the clubs that he's invested in, whether it be USG, who just won a title for the first time in 90 years, whether it be Brighton, who are now perennially in Europe, whether it be Como, who are slightly overlooked sometimes. They have made shockwaves across Italian football this year. To see Hearts get added to that portfolio, and given the track records, given the fact that he's made his money hedging his bets, I think we are sitting in a very good position in that sense. Like you say, I think other aspects of where things are at the moment in terms of the board and how the club's governed and stuff, that's probably slightly up in the air, as it would be expected in the event of something like this happening. In terms of like voting power, and as I understand that the 29% of shares he's purchasing, they are non-voting shares, and he will only have representation on the board. But that has necessarily is going to have an impact on how the operations of the board take place moving forward. All positive though, I think. I don't see any negative in that. It looks like everyone's kind of on board this project of improving Hearts with an end goal of upsetting the apple cart and even trying to challenge at the top end of the table. We've heard it before from Vladimir Romanov. We've heard it before from people like Joe Savage in recent years. But it does feel like there's something tangibly different about this investment. It's actual investment. It is money. It is a guy with a track record of football success everywhere he has invested. So I think it's extremely exciting. And to have an experienced coach like Derek McInnes, who has a clear-cut, concise plan for how he wants his teams to play football, knows the league. He's been perennially successful in Scotland. He's been in Europe so many times it's unreal. He has won trophies, albeit I believe it was just one League Cup he won with Aberdeen. But he's worked wonders at Killie as well. I think we are sitting in a very nice, very positive position, which is astonishing, really, considering how poor a season we actually had. But to look at that season and then say, but the ends sort of justify the means, we are in a really good position now, probably a better position now than we were a year ago when we would have recorded the season review of last year. It's all positive.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like you kind of touched on a lot of things there, John, that were on my kind of tick sheet of things to mention, which is no surprise to anyone that we have similar thoughts on that. Um, but yeah, like it's almost like you had said about the kind of um, negative season on the pitch. It was almost like that's kind of the straw that's broke the camel's back, and the investment and everything that's kind of come on board now. It does feel strange to be positive off the back of a disappointing campaign, because it was, on the field, and I'm sure we'll kind of touch on it, but I don't really have anything to add in terms of your Bloom remarks and stuff. But on the field this season, and you and I spoke about it before, and even all three of us have mentioned it at some point this season, that it's been a case of missed opportunities. It's been a case of you know overcomplicating things and trying too hard to do pretty football, and having different managers try the same things and obviously not working. Aside from Liam Fox, the only man that actually came in and did something different. Surprisingly, he was the most successful, but that's by the by. Um, yeah, it does feel like, obviously, like we finished bottom six. Nobody wants to be bottom six, but it almost feels like this is that sort of light bulb moment of, right, what we've done for so long hasn't worked. Like, there needs to be a change in the footballing department, and I think the board, maybe as an element of the pennies dropped, and we can start to kind of say, right, they've put football people in charge of the footballing decisions, which is obviously a big thing. You know where you stand on Andrew McKinley and Graham Jones is different, but I feel like the club is in a safe place at the moment in terms of that, and I think the manager in Derek McInnes as well, I think, is a big positive. Like we spoke about last week, I was a bit skeptical when I heard his name being mentioned, but when you drill down to the sort of bare bones of it, it makes complete sense, and the things that he's talking about make complete sense as well. And obviously, we'll talk about recruitment and players and who we'd like to keep and who might go, etc. The one thing, and the thing that will sum it all up for me, was Derek McInnes saying he wants wingers that are happy taking on defenders 1v1 and having a go, because as I have said for many episodes of this, my favourite thing to watch is a winger absolutely roasting a fullback. And if Derek McInnes can bring that back to Tynecastle, I'm all in. I'm all in.
I'm all in for was it the roasting as well, mate. Honestly, love a good roast. But just to kind of go back to what you were saying as well. Obviously, you guys mentioned it as well on the podcast we did last week. When obviously, obviously, us solely as a club, we we obviously want to do as well as we possibly can, push up the table as high as we can, try and get as many points as we can, like everybody else. But just when you put it down into context, and coming down from our Edinburgh, was it the counterparts, who have just apparently had the best season that they've had in a long time, and yet we still ended up 6 points behind them, and we still managed to finish in the bottom six, and we still managed in some context to still get group stage football, and him no even getting group stage football. So it makes me chuckle. But in the grander scheme of things as well, when you put it down on a paper as well, when you're going through Naismith, when you're going through the Critchley as well, and then obviously you've had Fox as well, kind of fill in those gaps. Obviously we're not ever going to know it. It's just they're going to throw out that narrative out there. Like, do you ever think that if Naismith got the time as David Gray did, where he persevered and he persevered and he persevered after every bad result, etc., etc., do you possibly think that he could have maybe turned things around, or do you, obviously with the narrative that it is now, we've ended up with a fantastic, like, I was a coach as well, but do you ever think could have Naismith actually turned it around if he'd got given the time to do so? And I'll give that one to Alan first.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because obviously we're looking at it with, in
Yeah,
hindsight. I really liked Stephen A. Smith. I thought he was the right man at the right time. And I know people were critical of him getting the job in the first place off the back of 2 wins in the bottom six in the top six or the season prior. That was what secured him the job effectively. And I like Stephen A. Smith. I've got a lot of time for him. I loved him as a player for Hearts. I thought he was brilliant. I thought he rallied people and he got people on side, and he just seemed to be the type that you would look at and go, yeah, he's going to be a manager and he's actually going to do all right. He then gets the job, and I wonder if in different circumstances it might have been better received. I know he was already at the club when he was given the job. If he'd maybe been coming in from outside, it might have been slightly different. Because I think a lot of supporters maybe tarred it with that, oh, you've only given him the job because he's 2 offices away from you, sort of thing, rather than doing the actual due diligence and finding the right person for it. But, he was given a good squad. He was given money to bring players in and, mold it into how he wanted it. The fact is, and John and I have spoken about this, and I'm sure when I throw it to him, he'll probably make a similar point. You don't need to be Pep Guardiola in Scottish football. And I think what Stephen A. Smith did wrong as his tenure sort of wore on, started putting square pegs in round holes because he created those round holes by changing shapes and changing systems and moving people around into places where they just couldn't play, and we had a good summer recruitment. Everybody talks about that and says, oh, you look back at it now and you go, well, maybe it wasn't as good as we all thought it was on paper based off of how the players performed. But we were sitting here going, yeah, do you know what? We've got a good squad heading into the season. Like we've covered the places we need to cover. But the problem with Naismith was he tried to keep everybody happy rather than settling on a system and a team and saying, right, if you want to get into my team, you have to be at this level or you have to be in this system. Like, I'm not going to alter it just for you. And he did. He then obviously overcomplicated things, and that kind of made things crumble. And that's just how it's gone. And obviously, Neil Critchley, I've not even spoken about, but it was a similar pattern again. Started out simple and then tried to tinker and change things. And then, like I say, Scottish football, and I've said this a lot, Scottish football is quite simple and basic. You don't need to be, Man City or Barcelona to go and do well in Scottish football. Okay, you need finance to go and win things, but that's by the by. You can have a system and a structure that is safe and solid, and you could do well. And Naismith, to begin with, had that, but for whatever reason, he shied away from that, and it changed. And to answer your question, do I think we could have had a better season? Perhaps, but I think the players on the park are a huge reason as to why we didn't, rather than those managers as well.
Yeah, this is a rough one for me to go into because, as you'll both remember, I was a massive cheerleader for Naismith. I celebrated a fair amount when he got the job permanently, and I felt really validated in that by his first season. I thought the first season was really good. Obviously, the wheels came off the cart big time in 2024-25. I am also pathologically stubborn, though, and borderline delusional. I think Robbie Nielsen would have turned it around if he'd been given more time. I still miss him. What I think happened when Naismith originally came in that made things work so well was, like Alan said, he started things off simply. He stripped things back in much the same way that Liam Fox did. Where the hubris kicked in and where the issues started was when he started trying to put his own stamp on the team and try to play a specific kind of brand of football that was not going to work. I feel that managers who come to Scottish football looking to implement a philosophy of their own will very often get devoured by this league. It's a pattern that we've seen happen with Neil Critchley. It's a pattern that happened to Robin Nielsen. As you've seen it happen to Jimmy Tillene at Aberdeen. They had a fantastic start this year and then it went completely to shit. Of course, they went on to win the Scottish Cup, but that's neither here nor there. I feel that the hubris and where things went wrong for Naismith was when he tried to put too much of his own stamp on the style of play instead of keeping things simple. And like Alan says, putting square pegs in round holes. And I think that Joe Savage bears a lot of the blame for that because Naismith was very inexperienced. Savage was supposed to be the guy who was the recruiting wizard. He should have been the one that was signing players to put in the right positions to play the type of football that Naismith was playing initially. They didn't do that. They had Blair Spittle playing at defensive midfield when Alan and I went to the Leighton Orient game. It was all over the place. There was no balance whatsoever to the squad. And it was a perplexing one because pre-season it looked like the summer recruitment had been fantastic, like Alan said. Something went wrong though, like in terms of the philosophy of how we played the game. It just was not balanced enough, and the players that were being played were in the wrong positions. And it was almost like, again, it was like he was trying to keep everyone happy all at once at the expense of the football itself. Do I think he would have turned it around? I don't think he's experienced enough to have had it in him to say, I've gotten things wrong and I need to simplify things. I don't think he would have turned it around.
Fair, man, fair. I mean, I don't want to like go on about it as well because I've been tired of talking about him, and obviously on the episodes that you may have done, Alan, as well. And I'm saying this in the most respectful manner that if we're going to experience what Jamestown has to offer and bear those fruits that it's got to offer as well, do you wholeheartedly believe that Neil Critchley was the first name that they pulled out of that hat? Because again, and I'm not just saying it because I wasn't a fan of him, but I genuinely believe that the managers that the Jamestown did pull out, like, in what world would you pull out Neil Critchley? Like, I understand that, like, he did well with the Blackpool, like, and the like, he got them like sort of like back up in the championship, like, was that right? Like, it just, even after his first few games, and I've said it all like along, I just couldn't see where that route was and where I don't want to say was it the connection, but it just seemed like a wrong fit from the get go, and I don't know. Obviously they've done well with McInnes now, but it's almost as if like they picked this name from nowhere because I don't know about you, but like I'd never heard of him, till we actually hired him.
Yeah, sorry, John. I think I'll take this one. I'll jump in and do my Mythbusters, but I'll carry it on from last week. I think Critchley, it's one of those, people looked at it and went, that's a Jamestown selection, that's a Jamestown selection. We all know that it wasn't a Jamestown. He wasn't the number one, put it that way. The way that recruitment went, the way that appointing Neil Critchley went, there was a list of managers that were presented by Jamestown, and Hogmo was the top man on that list. Neil Critchley was one of the men that applied for the Hearts job out with that. They then ran him through the Jamestown analytics at whatever parameters or whatever the scores were. He scored highly on that list. Derek McInnes was also on that list, and we're not talking about why we didn't hire him instead of Hogmo, interestingly. But, Per Hogmo's people moved the goalposts, and the board fell back on Neil Critchley because he was their second choice, whether that's, whatever the parameters were, whatever the reasoning behind it was, he was the one that they said, right. Maybe it was a case of from the list of people that applied, Neil Critchley was the most gettable of an option. I don't know, and we'll never know. But, Neil Critchley, as a man, I liked him. I liked the way he spoke. I liked how he conducted himself. But, again, it's all easy to say in hindsight because we're looking back at it now at the end of the season and saying, well, that didn't work. He had a plan, he had an idea, but I just feel like, similarly to what John was talking about, I feel like it was too complicated. And I think that it boils down to that. That's kind of where my thoughts are. I don't have a bad word to say about Neil Critchley on a personal level, but I feel like he came up and the job was too big for him. The expectations were too much. The fan pressure was perhaps something he wasn't prepared for, because you can watch Hearts and you can watch every game on TV, which he apparently did prior to taking the job. But when you're actually in that dugout and you actually experience it, I'm sure it's 10 times more intense than he even thought it would be. And, remarks towards the end of his tenure, things like saying a 0-0 draw against Motherwell in normal circumstances would be a good result, and talking about prior to an Edinburgh derby, may the best team win. That's not what you want to hear from a Hearts manager. And I was intrigued about the appointment of Critchley because I thought it might be quite interesting. I thought it might be quite a good way to go. But, obviously, lo and behold, I was wrong. Ewan, you were right. To be as skeptical as you were about it.
Hardly ever happens, though.
You're going to clip that part now. You're going to clip that part and just play it over and over again. I know you.
I'll be making my ringtone.
No, I think
that'll be the episode trailer.
Love it.
Fair enough. I just feel like it didn't work, and I feel like it was an experiment that they tried, and for whatever reason, why he got the job or not, it didn't work, and we move on, and that's the main thing. But I do feel like it was maybe an element of a manager coming up and just being a little bit out of his depth.
Yeah, I would largely second that. I felt when he was initially appointed, I was kind of surprised. I had, much like yourselves, I'd never really heard of him. I thought that we saw initial improvements. We did, I think, see we got our first league win under Critchley pretty much right away, and we did see a slight upturn in form temporarily until, again, he took that simple football that he started off playing and tried to add too much of his own stamp to it. And sometimes that stamp that he was trying to add to it felt like it was pretty superfluous. It wasn't being done for any reason other than to change things up. When Devlin obviously got the concussion, I think that was what ultimately derailed Critchley's tenure in charge, because he had absolutely no reaction to it. Like, there was no flexibility there. He changed to the diamond, which did not work. It just categorically didn't work. It made us a worse team. And it took away that left-sided double act of Spittle and Penrice, which up until that point was the biggest threat we had. From there on, they just never were able to recover that spark. So some of the changes that he made, anytime he had to adapt to anything, felt like it was the wrong move. Substitutions, something that I criticised quite heavily. Substitutions were never reactionary. It almost felt like he had it down in a wee booklet somewhere, right on the 72nd minute, bring this guy on, regardless of what the situation in the game was. I do feel like it was hard done by, I feel, in the sense that he was kind of booted out after such a short tenure. Would he have had the ability to sort of do better with a full pre-season? I don't think anyone could possibly know. What I do think wholeheartedly is that we have made a massive upgrade. And Ewan, I think that certainly I'll echo Alan's sentiment. You were quite right, I think, to be critical of it. What I would say, though, I do have my doubts that Hogmo would have been the number one name on that list initially. I think that first name on the list was probably Derek McInnes, even back then. But I feel that the board would have probably had an approach of, we don't want to bring in one of the old pals after Naismith, because we know that we can't please all the fan base. And they probably looked at Hogmo, who would have been maybe the second name on that list, and have said, we don't want to bring him in either, because we've got to have a section of the fan base that are going to be like, oh, you've just brought him in because he's got a fancy name, hoping that he can replicate what Tilleen's done at Aberdeen. And I think that that's why, when they've received an application from down south from a guy in Critchley who's got Liverpool on his resume, they've said, let's have a word with him and see what ideas he can bring to the table. It's ultimately not worked out, but it's worked out in the long run because it's led us to where we are now.
Yeah, no, I think your point about Ed the Critchley was it justified, but the fact that you've have both said outright that I was right, then like I won't have to say any more on that. I mean, before we get into the kind of the squad, like sort of like review, if you will, I think it is only proper that we do say a massive thanks to Ed the Fox as well. I think you can maybe argue that the way that he's been told that his role or his like assistance is no longer required. Like I think it is a good and a bad thing, just mainly for the reasons that I think that now he can go on and try to establish himself as a head coach. I think for the matches that he did take over, most notably, he gave us our first win in the in the Conference League as well, which was a massive like kind of like the RAL like sort of a booster as well at that point. Like so I think if he were to get a job, like just to put it out there, if he were to get the the Partick Thistle job, like for example, that could perhaps like sort of suit him. But for all these like done for the club, he's been here for the quite a long time as well. And yeah, I wish him absolutely nothing but the absolute was it a best for him.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think
Yeah.
I was just going to sort of quickly throw it in before we kind of move on. I'd mentioned it last week, I think it was, when you and I were on, John. But what he did was he came in, and you kind of touched on it a little bit as well. He made things simple. He stripped things back again, and I think you coined the phrase. He made us a bit more McInnes like before McInnes had even been in the door, which I think makes perfect sense, really. I think as well, I'd said about it before that Liam Fox was responsible for 25% of the points we gathered this season, which says its own stories. Oh, my lights just died there. Sorry, folks. I don't know what happened there. That was weird. But yeah, he's that was the light going out on Liam Fox's time at Hearts. There was some metaphor there. That was it, which is what I was going to come to next. I think he's been a good manager previously. I know his record prior to sort of being at Hearts wasn't particularly brilliant, but he's definitely got something about him. And I saw a lot of people suggesting, he was unfairly treated in the way he was let go. And I don't necessarily think he was unfairly treated. I think it's maybe Derek McInnes has said, I don't have a role for him. And considering McInnes is bringing two assistants with him that he's worked with for years, I kind of want to favour that as much as I like Liam Fox and as much of a Heartsman as he is. You do need a clean slate. And, it's not a bad thing for all parties, really. Hopefully, and listen, it wouldn't surprise me if our paths crossed again at some point. We put up a bat signal in the sky if we need Liam Fox to swoop back in and save the day, or a fox symbol maybe might be more appropriate. But yeah, I hope he goes on and does well for himself because he deserves it.
Like his counterpart over in Rome, Alan, he's the Gordon Claudio. The Leo Ranieri for us anytime we need him. Completely echo that. I'm presuming that he will have seen the momentum that he's built, how he's able to apply that momentum to his CV going forward, and he'll want to crack at managing somewhere permanently, somewhere that's maybe a less pressure field club, like Ewan, as you say, like maybe a Partick Thistle. A job like that, I think, would be fantastic for Fox. Chance to go to like a proving grounds and start to build the CV as a manager again going forward. I wish him all the best. Hope he has a massively successful career. And who knows? Never say never for Gorgie Claudio 3.0.
I do 3.0. Love it. Love it. Well, as much as we always love to blame, was it whomever is in charge at that point, obviously we've thrown massive dogs abuse at at all of was it Naismith and the Critchley, the Budge and the Kinley as well. We also do have to shine a light on the squad as well. Obviously I know that you can't was it to go around and sack like a full squad, of course not, but just with the way that the game is going, I don't think players or a squad in particular tend to take a lot of the was it of the blame in that favor. I think that we could probably all agree with that. There have been players in that squad. There's been was it Deadwood as well that have not taken nearly enough of the blame and the responsibility and the accountability as well for how we played. Players just not wanting to play, players not showing up as well. I think to kind of bring it back to like a more like sort of was it a positive note, we when we did have our was it a recruitment last year, to get pre the contracts done by further like Spittle, Danda, the Pen Rice, etc. I think the only one that you could probably say that has had a decent season in terms of what we've done as as a club as well. And you guys can obviously that I can all say if there's been anybody else, but the only person that I would think on that like sort of list has been James. Was it a Penrice? You know, he started off a bit slow in terms of to kind of cement that role as his own. But then as each game became, he's just started to grow more and more and more in the confidence as well. And again, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I do believe as well that there has been a tension from down south as well, where there are a potential number of the clubs interested in him, and to kind of like put that all into context as well with everything that's happening with the Bloom investment as well. I think with the squad as a whole, and a way that I would love to have that kind of forward, like sort of thinking the going ahead is that no matter how good a player we've got on our hands, every player will have that like sort of was it the price tag, and then invest that back into the squad. Like I would love to hear what you guys like think on that. In comparison to how long we've had to hang on to Shanklin for as well. But like just as a whole, is there anybody else that you think like has stood out, or do you think it's fair to say that in terms of the squad we want to rebuild, get rid was it of the deadwood, and as I said before, every player has a price tag.
I think aside from Kabangu, who granted he came in January and had a fantastic start when he first came in. I think the only signing we've made in the last year that really made an impact on the success on the field was James Penrice. Blue Spittle could probably be added to that to an extent, to a lesser extent though, because I think Penrice was definitely more consistent than Spittle. Not entirely, to blame for that was Blair. Obviously, we've talked before earlier about the changes of formation and how that twosome really never got going again. So yeah, Penrice was also quite rightly rewarded for his work with several awards. He pretty much swept the awards at the Player of the Year awards night. Don't think that there was really any competition whatsoever there. A guy like a Forrest who had a fantastic 4-game streak at the end. Shanklin had a really good 4 games at the end of the season. Those were far too small sample sizes for players who were either largely inconsistent or pretty much anonymous the entire season until that point. It's interesting that you mentioned potential interest down south, because I felt that Harry Milne actually deputised really well at left back. So while I don't see Milne as a first choice option, if we're able to recruit a decent enough left back in the summer, I wouldn't be opposed to selling Penrice, even with the season he just had. Sell high and invest that money back in, as long as we're using Jamestown to make sure we make an upgrade in that position, because that's something that we have failed time and again in recent years to do. We'll sell a player anytime we get a decent fee for someone, and then we don't actually upgrade that much at the position. So we really need to ensure that we're doing that. I think Malachi Boateng leaving in January and the sale of Oyagoke, we didn't replace them in January, and fortunately, Borchgrevink is coming in. He'll probably be the replacement at right back. Have we at any point replaced Malachi Boateng? Don't necessarily think we have. Although, granted, you have got guys like Ewan back, and we've got several. I mean, central midfield is an area where we're quite hefty, and we've got is it Ocean McKenty as well who's being linked. So we are looking at strengthening there. But yeah, I think if a club comes in with a decent enough offer and it matches our valuation, and we have something ready to go in terms of replacement value, we should definitely be looking at selling anyone. It's an important transitional period. We have to be building the best squad possible if we're going to challenge at the top end of the table. It's as simple as that. Just leave Craig Gordon alone. He needs to finish his career at Hearts.
Oh, we're gonna get on that, John. Don't worry, mate. Don't worry.
I just wanted to kind of jump in. I know you're talking about players that have had sort of standout seasons, and I think mentioning James Penrice is the obvious option. Obviously, he got into the PFA Team of the Year, won all the awards that Hearts basically have to offer. a player that, like you'd said, I was probably the most underwhelming in terms of summer arrivals. You know, a new left back coming in from Livingston on a free. Obviously, they've given us players in the past that have gone on and done reasonably well. But I don't think you would have expected, and I don't think anyone would have expected sitting here, you know, looking back at when he signed. I don't think anybody sitting here now says, yeah, I said he'd be player of the season from that point. You know, obviously it helps that Shankland had an absolute fall off and he was therefore not guaranteed the award. But yeah, Penrice has come in and done a fantastic job. And I think he, we're obviously talking about the model of, you know, selling high or selling when a player's at their highest value, which is a big part of what we're trying to do and a big part of the Jamestown recruitment and a big part of just our new player trading model, which is obviously something that we need because, you know, I spoke about it previously about, you know, mistakes being made and things just not quite running how they should in the footballing department. And player trading is a big part of football, whether we like it or not. You know, obviously fans want to have their favourite players that stay at clubs for 5 years, but football's not like that anymore. And I know people will say, oh, loyalty is a big thing, and it is, it's a massive thing, but it doesn't exist as much as it used to. And I think, you know, put it this way, if I was getting a name on the back of a shirt, I'm not sure I would, because there's a lot of the players at Hearts at the moment, even those that came in January, that may well be away in the summer, you know, depending on obviously the new manager coming in and assessing them. But a couple of players as well that I wanted to mention, I'll look back to my point, was the emergence of James Wilson. I think that is a big, big positive of this season. You could argue he was overused. You could argue that he was thrown into the spotlight in the deep end maybe early, but he certainly handled himself very well. And every time I've seen him, he doesn't look like an 18-year-old and only just recently turned 18-year-old as well, playing, you know, at the top end of the pitch for Hearts. Do I want Derek McInnes to rely as heavily on him? No. And it's not because I don't rate James Wilson, because I very much do. But I think an element of taking him out of that spotlight might not be a bad thing. You know, you don't want to throw him in, and we've no idea how Derek McInnes is going to set that team up. You know, James Wilson's not a big physical striker. He can put himself about, but he's not a big physical striker. And we know that McInnes favours that as a striker. So what does that mean for James Wilson? Maybe his game time will be limited to being an impact player or being, you know, playing off a wide area, which he can do. So it'll be interesting to see what McInnes wants to do with him. As well as that, obviously, I'm going to give my, what feels like every year, shout out to Benny Beringame, a man that just makes that midfield tick when he's involved, makes that team tick when he's involved. And getting over injury issues and getting back to the Benny that we've had before is massive as well, you know. And we spoke about it last week about Benny doing an interview and saying, I'm not sure where I fit into that McInnes style of football. Derek McInnes would be daft to not involve Benny Beringame. He is one of the most intelligent players in our team, and everybody knows I love an intelligent football player. But I would, yeah, listen, I love Benny, and I hope he stays for a very, very long time to come. But the new player trading model, like you said, and like you both said, every player does have a price tag, apart from Craig Gordon, of course. But yeah, if every player has a price tag, so there is that element of, we've had some really good success stories this season, i.e., you know, as we've spoken about, Penrice, Wilson. But if they were presented with a big offer, the way the model is, this is how it has to be. And it's going to be difficult. But when you look at the way the player trading we've done in the past, we've let players walk out the door for free that we should have got money for. You know, you're talking a John Suter, you're talking a Giannelli. Hell, we're talking about Lawrence Shankland. Obviously, we don't know what his future looks like, and by the time this episode goes out, there may well be more developments on that. But Derek McInnes is trying to keep him. You know, he's had 2 conversations with him recently, trying to keep him to set a new, you know, to get a new deal set in. But if he walks away for nothing, that's another player that we've allowed to leave for nothing. That, in a different model, in a different way, we sell him and we make money. You know, football is football, but it is a business at the same time, and people won't like that. But the money to put back in and regenerate has to come from somewhere. And player trading is a massive, massive part of that. And we need to get that right. So yeah, that's my rant and that's my ramble. But yeah, that's just my point.
Yeah, no, like I get what you mean in terms of, like, you know, I mean, to go to your point about, was it a player like sort of trading like as well? for all as much as I would love him to stay, who knows? Maybe there's a world where we do sell both. Was it a Benny and was it Kame as well? Like two players that have been the spine in the center of that pitch for a long time, and it's weirdly worked as well in terms of Kami's like kind of gradual like sort of was it a progression being that kind of defensive minded player that's turned into almost like a box to a box mid like a mid fielder as well. And like I think whatever happens to these the kind of fan the favorites as well, I think especially in this time now we've got to trust the process in what both the Guinness and what Jamestown kind of recommends in that in that space, because again now it could be the peak was it time to tell these players as an example as well. And if McInnes feels the same way as was it a Benny does for example, then it would be horrible. But if this is the way he wants to go, then again I'm in a different kind of mindset as opposed to when we had the Critchley in charge, where I would be like, you let them go, and I swear to do you know what I mean? Whereas now I feel a bit more kind of comfortable in trusting that kind of was it that kind of the reset as such. You know what I mean? I mean, just as you guys said there as well, and this is not to kind of create a roaring kind of was it a fire like in was it John's eyes, but with the Craig the Gordon deal, I was happy about it. But just to kind of throw it out there as well, and you guys can kind of was it back it up as well if you feel I'm wrong here. But do you also think it's right, or do you think that he is going to be the number one for all the games that we play? Because for all as much I feel it is deserved in the sense that we probably all feel that this is going to be his last year, and I think it's absolutely right to kind of see himself out, and get all the plaudits that he deserves, absolutely. But in that sense as well, you've got to create a pathway in the sense of for the goalkeepers that we've actually got, especially for Scott, essentially Scotland's number two as well, who's just signed a 2-year contract extension as well. And bearing in mind, for all as much as it was only 3 or 4 games, but Fulton only letting 1 goal throughout that time as well. So if you throw that into the factor, that do you think it would be right for Craig Gordon to be starting every single game? And I'll hand it all over to John because I know his undying love for the Gordon will always shine through. So what was it? Do you think, buddy?
Delighted that Craig Gordon has agreed terms on a 1-year contract. My heart says that I want him to be the number one. I want him to have a good enough season to justify it. The right thing, I think, for McInnes to do would be to not go into next season with any clear one in mind and use the pre-season to determine, and also the group stages of the League Cup, to determine who is going to get the gloves to start the season. I think it would be irresponsible to just be like, right, Craig Gordon is Craig Gordon, therefore he gets number one. That's just something you can't do as a football manager. You have to go with who is working best. I would be keen to see Craig Gordon back in goal permanently next year with a settled defensive front of him, something he didn't really have all year, and yet still managed to finish fourth in the division in clean sheets on a 7th place team. and he was still making wonder saves at 42 years old. Just so that one's for the kind of Gordon's past it crowd. Logically, do I think he's going to be number one all season? No. I think that he will be playing more of a part-time role this coming season. He'll be in between the sticks, probably in cup games. I think that Xander is going to come into pre-season with the bit between his teeth and ready to fight for that job. And I think that that's the right way to do it. I want to see him step up. It's like you want a guy to step up and challenge for that position. You want that to be the case everywhere across the park. I think this might be the year that Xander really does. And like you say, Ryan Fulton is going to be there on the fringes as well, and he had a fantastic run of games there. Again, he had a much more settled defence in front of him than we've had all season, and that helps a lot. That helps so much. It helps immeasurably. I was a goalkeeper myself growing up. Like, I know the value of having a solid defence in front of you and how wrong things can go if you don't. So yeah, that's my more measured take. My heart says I don't want Craig Gordon ever to retire, and he should just be number one ad infinitum at Hearts. It's going to be a rough experience for me a year from now if this does turn out to be his last year. But hopefully we can give him the send off he deserves.
Yeah, I think, just to sort of add my 2 cents in, I think, I like you said, you and I thought when Xander Clark signed his new contract that it was kind of like a sign that, okay, he's maybe the goalkeepers have had a conversation. We all know about the goalkeepers union, they all back each other up, but obviously the club didn't say anything official about Gordon and his future plans at that point. But I think it was kind of almost like just hearsay from the fans, like, oh, well, if Xander Clark signed a new contract, maybe Gordon's away, maybe Xander knows something for him to commit an extra year or 2 years, really, because I think Xander's still 2027, whereas Gordon's just till 2026, as is Ryan Fulton as well, till 2026. But obviously, that's not how it's panned out, and Gordon signed his new contract, and that's all wonderful. I love Craig Gordon. I've always thought he's a brilliant goalkeeper. I totally agree with your settled defence points, and I'll mention that when we talk about the defence if we touch on that. But what I don't want next season is for it to be the Craig Gordon farewell tour. I adore the man, I really do. But you're right in the sense of, does he play every week? Listen, if he starts the season as number one and doesn't make any mistakes and doesn't, and leads a good start, then he'll keep the gloves for as long as that's the case. Do you play him in the cups, or do you play somebody else in the cups to then try and make that transition into the following season when we'll be saying, right, who is the number one? There's a possibility of that. That could be the case. But I totally agree. I think Derek McInnes will go in there and think, right, I've got a selection of very good goalkeepers, because he does. And even the young guys, we've had Harry Stone and Liam McFarlane both out on loan this season doing well. So I don't think the goalkeeping situation is one that needs to be touched as much as other areas of the pitch do. But yeah, listen, I was pleased when Gordon signed his contract. But yeah, I want there to be a natural kind of passing of the gloves as it goes. But that'll only happen if one falls off, or, one of the players kind of has a little bit of a dip in form. But yeah, listen, Craig Gordon's an icon. I have a lot of time for him, and I think that is a big part of it. But obviously, there will be a point where you do have to look at it and go, right, how long can he go on for? This is one more year. I feel like this is his last year, let's be honest, and we'll all, be misty-eyed when he does call it a day. But I think the right thing to do, there's no substitute for experience, ultimately. And I think Gordon, even just having him around the place and having his influence around those young goalkeepers will be massive for them as well. Because, as I say, experience is a huge, huge thing. And Gordon has more experience than anybody in that squad. So having him there for that, I don't, to me, if I'm Derek McInnes, I'm not looking at it going, just let Gordon leave. I'd be saying, as much as I'm, determined to keep Shankland, I'd be saying Gordon's presence, even if he's not the number one, Gordon's presence and his experience is enough to give him an extra year. Plus, he finished the season with he did finish the season with an injury as well. So there is that element of saying it's not the right way for him to go out.
No, absolutely not. And, I do agree with you both as well. If he starts the season fantastic, then yeah, absolutely, because as we all know, it all kind of was it that comes down to who's on the form as well. So only time will tell. So what we're going to do in terms of the squad aspect, it'll go I'll go Alan, John, and then myself. I just want a quick was it keep or sell? Obviously, I won't mention all the new players that we've signed, and equally, the was it the players that have also signed new the contract or are the currently out of contract, i.e., Lauren Shanklin. So let's go around the squad. So um, Xander Clark,
Keep.
Yeah, keep.
keep as well. Good start. The Ryan Fulton,
I would sell.
Interesting.
very interesting.
Yeah, I would keep Ryan Fulton. I think he showed fantastic poise and goal in the last 4 games of the season. I think you have to keep him. Plus,
Absolutely.
with Gordon, both Gordon and Clark have had pretty bad injuries the last couple of years. Neither of them are guaranteed to stay fit all year, so you can probably need that experienced third head there. So I keep.
Fair
If it
enough.
means bringing Harry Stone finally into the first team fucking squad, then yeah, please sell. But ultimately, I would probably keep. But yeah, let's go to the defense. At Penrice,
Keep if we can, but sell if the money's worth it.
Aye, same as Alan. Keep him if we
same as
can.
me.
If we get our mental offer, you've got to take it.
Absolutely, no, I agree with that as well. Stephen Kingsley.
It's a really, really tricky one. I like Kingsley a lot. I think he's a quality player. And like I said about the experience side of things, I'd be in favour of keeping him. But again, there are whispers that he could be one of the players that might be moved on. I'm going to let my heart rule my head and say keep him. But it's one of those names that if he was to leave, I wouldn't maybe cry about it as much as other players. But I'll go keep.
Sell. I'm assuming that Kingsley's probably on a pretty hefty wage. If we can get a decent offer for him, and he's also 30 years old, I would absolutely sell.
I agree with John. I would probably say sell. It's not just like, but to be like sort of anything bad about him. But again, with this
Agreed.
whole
Yeah.
kind of the reset as well, and he's only got a year left on his contract. So if we can get something for him, then I would I'd agree with that. Our last left back, Milne.
I'll say keep on Milne. The only reason that I said about keeping Kingsley is because I think the possibility is that Penrice does leave, and if that's the case, then Kingsley should stay. But Milne, for me, showed enough in the brief cameos to keep him.
Right there with you, Alan. Yeah, I would keep him dependent upon what happens with Penrice.
Yeah, I would probably say keep. Just again, whatever happens with James, was it Penrice? But again, I'm not too like sort of arsed. Was it here or there? In the central defence, James McCart.
Keep. I think he's solid. If he ends up being a solid backup option, if we end up getting somebody else in at defence, he's a left-footed centre half, and those are as rare as rocking horse shit at the moment. So yeah, keep McCart.
McCart's contracted to 2029, I believe.
Yep.
I believe that we should sell because I think that
Ooh.
contract is going to be quite a high wage, and I think it could become a bit of an albatross in the next year or so. So I would sell McCart.
Interesting. I think I'd be more inclined to agree with Alan. I think since he came in, he's been a solid, steady, like sort of was it centre back. I think as a squad option at least, I think you could probably say that you'd be in relatively safe hands, like with him. So, very interesting, John. Honestly, we're going to start the fights here. Nielsen.
Sell for the good of his career. I like him, but I don't see the progression for him with us. And I'm sure at a level he could do well, but I feel like he's not at the required level that we need or we aim to get to. So I would sell.
I just had the screen freeze up as you guys were wrapping up on the previous player. So who is it we're talking about?
Nielsen.
Nielsen. Yeah, I agree with Alan. Sale.
Okay, fair. So what I'll do is I'll group these next ones because these are very interesting ones. Like these guys could probably go either way. So we've got Halkett, Steinvender, and our beloved Frankie Kent.
Do you want to take it, John?
I would keep Halkett. I would. Frankie Kent's a fun one because if we get a good offer for him, you've mentioned to me, Alan, that there have been rumblings about him wanting to have a move down south. If he wants to go back down south and we get a good enough offer, I would sell him. What happens with Kent would inform for me how I would choose to go with Steinvender. I think Steinvender's probably a defender that McInnes will be very fond of because he's quite pacey. You know, he's got a bit of strength about him. It's not probably the oh I would sell Kent and keep Steinvender, and I would keep Halkett. It's not because I don't like Kent. I think Kent's probably one of our best centre halves, but I think if he wants a move, if we can get a decent fee for him, why would you not?
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. And to be honest, that's kind of where I've fallen as well. I think everybody knows how much I rate Craig Halkett, but the fact he's made out of glass is something that is a concern. If Derek McInnes can get a tune out of him and get him back to that sort of dominating defender that we know he can be, then I see there's a role in him, a role in the team for him rather. Frankie Kent, like you said, I don't know if it's one of those sort of rumors that didn't really have any legs and just started on kickback and has become like a fact that Kent wants to move back home. But there have been whispers for quite a while of that. So whether there's some substance to it or not, I don't know. But he only has 1 year left on his contract, just like Halkett. Steinvender is contracted till 2028. But with the new model and the way that we're doing things, any of those three could go, and it wouldn't shock me if at least one of them did. The guy that we're bringing in that you mentioned, or that we're close to bringing in that you mentioned earlier, John, Oshin McAtee, I think his name is, or I can't remember off the top of my head. He is a defender, but also can play defensive midfield, and I think it's more sort of that's potentially where he'll play. McInnes talked about wanting a big physical midfielder, but we'll talk about midfielders when we get there. But if he comes in, that's potentially another centre back option. And if we keep Stephen Kingsley, that's also another potential centre back option. So I do expect there to be some movement in the centre half position. And I think Steinvender is one of those guys that was obviously identified by Jamestown. Any player that is in that model is free game. You know, they come in for 6 months and then they get sold. You know, it was the same, obviously, Oyugoke and Boateng, two players that you mentioned earlier. They weren't brought in exclusively by Jamestown because we didn't really have that model in place at that time. But they identified as that time to be the best time to sell them because the interest was there. If Steinvender has interest, he could go. If Kent has interest, he could go. I would keep Halkett purely because I love the man. And I know that, again, it's probably one of those players that I really like because I know how many people don't rate him. I just enjoy being that one that waves the Craig Halkett flag. I was waving the Oda flag, but our previous manager decided it'd be a good idea to send him back to Japan. But yeah, Halkett for me, keep. Steinvender, I'll say keep. But again, it wouldn't shock me if he did go. Kent, like you, I agree. If there's an offer there and he wants to go, let him go because I do feel like he might be quite a hefty earner as well, potentially.
All right. Mine's is going to go completely the other way. If a good offer came in for Kent, I would say probably sell him. Like, like he's had a decent season, but like again, as you said, Alan, with the model that we're going for, I would probably say if a good offer came in, sell him. Steinvender, I would keep. Halkett, I love the man, but for fuck's sake, end this torture, my man. Like, seriously. Like, I love Halkett. Don't get me wrong. On his day, he's a fucking phenomenal centre back. But the boy is so injury prone. Like, he's almost like the was it Eddie Reese James of Scotland. Like, he's just always injured. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing on him, but like if you're gonna have a centre back who's going to be like a yes, no, if maybe, like you know what I mean, like you know, in that sense, you know. But yeah, so I would,
It's fair.
yeah, like you know, moving on to the only registered the right back that we've got before our new the right back comes in, who has also taken quite a lot of flack recently. Forrester.
Keep, keep. Backup option, perfect backup option, young player. I think he got a lot of flack, and I understand why he got a lot of flack, but he's not a bad player. And I think people need to know what they want, and I'll keep it brief, but a lot of people say, and this is a point that I want to make, you see a lot of people going, oh, we need to give youth players a pathway. We need to play young players. They identify with Hearts. We need to play them. Then we put one in and he maybe has a few moments where he doesn't quite deliver or he doesn't have a few great games in a row and suddenly, no, he shouldn't be playing, drop him, he's not ready, etc. Adam Forrester, this is Adam Forrester's first season at top flight football level. He'd been playing in the Highland League or the Lowland League for the B team under Liam Fox, who then obviously gave him that springboard to play in the first team. Is he ready to be a regular in the first team? I'm going to say no, but he's a more than capable backup. And I think if we're all assuming Borchjevic is going to be the first choice right back, I'm happy with that. If Adam Forrester has a place in the team, keep him. You need to keep that homegrown identity. And I think for all the shiny, fancy Jamestown stuff, we need to remember that there does need to be a homegrown element there. And I think Adam Forrester fills that role. So I would keep.
Completely agree, Alan. Yeah, keep almost out of necessity as well. We don't really have another backup right back, and it's taken us how long to find a first choice right back. We don't know if we're going to have the capacity to bring in another right back that's going to be a suitable alternative. 100% keep Forrester. He's a young player. He's obviously been thrown in at the deep end. It's not been his fault. It's been out of kind of necessity. Keep him. Let him develop under Borchjevic.
Absolutely, I would 100% keep. Like there's like I don't see any sort of downside to keeping him, and you wouldn't necessarily get a like if you were to try and sell him, you wouldn't exactly get him huge. Was it a fee for him? So yeah, absolutely keep him. Moving in to the midfield, we'll start on the right side again. I'll group this as it comes. Cammy Devlin, Xander Khartoum, Aidan Denham.
I would keep Cammy because to me, Cammy Devlin just gets what it means to play for Hearts. Is he the most technically gifted football player we've ever seen? Absolutely not. But is he a grafter? Does he fight for everything? Yes, 100%. To me, he embodies what a Hearts player, certainly Hearts teams that I've grown up watching, I could see a role in most of those teams for a Cammy Devlin type. So yeah, I'd keep Cammy, although he does only have 1 year left on his contract, so there is that caveat. Do you sell him now if he's not interested in staying another year after that? There's a possibility there. Sander Khartoum, I hope in time, I'm going to say keep him, but I hope that becomes, that gets justified. It'll be interesting to see what McInnes thinks of him. Obviously, he was brought in a January window where it's never good and it's never easy to sign quality players in January window. But I still feel like there's a player there that could do something. We saw it briefly. And I feel like it's not worth selling him right now for what we invested in him in January. We paid 6 figures for him, and I don't think we get that back right now for selling him, or maybe not the level that we paid for him. Aidan Denham, and I know I've just spoken about young players and given them platforms and pathways, etc. I like Aidan Denham, but to me, he's another one for the good of his career. I feel like he goes now. He's another one that's contracted till 2026. So I would sell Aidan Denham if there's an offer or loan him out potentially.
It's interesting. For me, my answer to that question depends on how McInnes intends to set us up. If it's going to be a 4-3-3, that's different from if we were to play, say, a 4-2-3-1.
Yeah.
I would sell Devlin. I would try to get the best offer we can for Cammy Devlin, because I do not think he's going to want to stay at Hearts beyond this year. I think he's going to want to take a step up in his career. And he's earned it, quite frankly. His play at Hearts has been superb overall. So I would sell him now and try to get a good fee for him to prevent the situation that Alan was talking about earlier with so many people that we've lost for free. I would sell Khartoum if the intent was to deploy him as a central midfielder. That answer would be different. I would keep him if the intent was to play him in the attacking midfield. I would sell Aidan Denham for much the same reason that Alan suggested. I feel like he needs to take the step up, but I don't think that he's quite capable of taking the step up we need to stay at Hearts. And I wouldn't be in favour of loaning him back out again, because you can't just keep doing that every year. At some point, a guy has to either, bed himself in or, cut ties and try and get something for him.
Yeah, Alan. What I was going to say, in a nutshell, for different reasons, I think they all get sold. I agree with what you said, John. I think with Cammy Devlin coming into his last year of his contract, I think he'll probably want to take that next step as well for himself. And as I just mentioned, with the last year in his contract, is there any more that he can do at Hearts? Who knows? But I reckon there'll probably be an opportunity to sell him. Khartoum, I like the glimpses of what we've seen. However, again, if it's the same situation as the Yagoki, like sort of like, was it a scenario where if we get a decent offer from, I reckon we'll probably sell. And again, John, for the same the reason as you, for all as much as Alan, and I agree with him that you have to give young players the platform to actually shine. But I feel as if under Naismith he did get that. Was it a platform to shine? So I reckon his time to shine will probably be somewhere else. But again, that's not to say that he's not a good the player. I just think his services would be better off somewhere else. So interesting answers, boys. So moving over to the left side, you have got Benny, Neuenhoff, or Macaulay Tate.
I'm going to start it backwards. I'll go Macaulay Tate. I would keep. I think he had a very impressive loan spell at Livingston. I think he'll come back with a point to prove. I think he'll come back thinking previous manager didn't really rate me that much, because one of Critchley's first things was just loan him out, and he didn't really get much of a look in. If I'm Macaulay Tate, I'm coming back with a bit between my teeth going, I've learned a lot. I've been at a side that's been promoted in Livingston as well. Let's not forget that. I think there's an element of unfinished business there, and I like Macaulay Tate. I saw him, when he first made the breakthrough at Hearts, and I thought, you know what, this is a midfielder that could do something. It's like I said earlier about pressure on a young player. There's a lot of that, but I think for Macaulay Tate to go to Livingston, I think that was a perfect loan for him. And I think, from what a lot of Livingston fans have said, they'd love to have him back next year. And obviously, the step up from Livingston to Hearts is night and day, but we've seen players that we have signed from Livingston go on and do relatively well for us. So, yeah, I'd keep Macaulay Tate. It'll obviously depend on what Derek McInnes wants to do, and I think that caveat has to be put across every player in terms of what John said about the systems, etc. We don't know how we're going to play, but I think if there's a role for Macaulay Tate in that squad, I think he will stay. But again, he could be another one that, for his own good of his own career, he might choose to leave. He might choose to go somewhere else. But I personally would keep him. Neuenhoff, I really like Neuenhoff. I do. But there's a part of me that thinks we sell him. Just because I feel like we've not really seen the best of him. I think he had a really good run, quite sort of not early in his career at Hearts, but he had a really good run of games where people were like, "Oh, where's this guy been?" And I think he came back from an injury, if memory serves me right, and people were like, "Yeah, he's like a new signing. This is brilliant." I like Neuenhoff, but I feel like he's contracted till 2027. This summer could be the summer to move him on. The thing is, all of these things are caveated with if there's a market for them. There doesn't necessarily need to be, but for us to be able to get any sort of money for these players, we need to have that market for them. Benny, I love him. I want him to stay. If I was Derek McInnes, after I was off the phone to Lauren Shankland, I'd be on the phone to Benny asking what he wants to do, because he either signs a new contract this summer or he might go. But to me, Benny is the captain waiting to happen. So for that reason, I would be offering him a new contract, whatever he wants. Give him the world, give him the keys to Gorgie. I don't care. I live in Gorgie. I can give him the keys to my flat if he wants them. He is a quality option, and I would keep him if the option was there to do so. But like you said about Devlin, Ewan, it could be that case of, does Benny want to go elsewhere? You know, Benny, the famous quote that Benny made when he first arrived at Hearts was, "I will make this club money." The only way he's going to make us money right now is selling him in this summer window. If he doesn't want to stay and sign a contract, that is.
You kind of took the words right out of my mouth there, Alan, with regards to Benny. I would be, if I was McInnes, I would sit down with Benny and ask him, do you want to stay here or do you want to challenge yourself elsewhere? The answer to that question would inform what I would do. If he wants to stay, I would put together a contract offer and try and keep him. If he says, I quite fancy a challenge elsewhere, I would start straight away looking to sell him, trying to maximise the amount of money we can get for him. Neuenhoff, I would keep. I think we kind of need to keep someone. So, and Neuenhoff is a very good player when he's at his best. I feel like he is a player who can potentially thrive under Derek McInnes. I think that he's a player that will be very valuable to McInnes' side. And I would keep Macaulay Tate. He's a fantastic prospect. He's coming off a really good season, and I think he's going to come in, like you said, Alan, looking to compete for a spot in that team. And that's what you need. You need competition in every space. So I think he's a kid that's going to come in and try and do that.
I agree, John. I think to start off with Tate, I think not only I think that he did have a fantastic loan spell, as you said, Alan, but I think he deserves that chance as well. I think out of the young players that we put through during was it Naismith's time, I think he was one of the ones that actually stood out as well. So I would 100% keep Neuenhoff as well. Again, for the reasons that you said, John, I think he's a player that McInnes would want in his team. I think technically he's very good in all of the central midfielders we have. But at the same time, if he needs to get dirty, like he can. So I think 100% I would keep. What to do with Benny? What to do with Benny? I think it could probably go either way. I think he can either be an integral part to the vision of what McInnes wants to do, or if I was Hearts as a club, I would, if that wasn't the case, I would probably try to get him out this was it summer, I think, because if you've only got 1 year left on his head, the contract as well, you have to take that it was into account. So yeah, I'd say to keep, but if you're not going to stay, get him sold like as soon as possible. So we're going to go up to the final third of the park. Blair Spittle and Jan Danda.
See, this is difficult because personally, I would not complain if either of those players left the football club in the summer. But Derek McInnes has been on record as saying he tried to sign both Blair Spittle and Jan Danda whilst at Kilmarnock. So there's an element of he might be quite happy to work with them. I like the players as individuals. I like Spittle. I think he had a very good first half of the season, and then his engine fell out. He fell off. I don't know how many 90 minutes he actually completed, which is something that will be an issue as well. He was one of these ones that, John, you mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Critchley, a man that made substitutions like they were written in his notebook. Spittle was one of the ones that was constantly subbed off, regardless of how he was playing, with about 20 minutes to go in every game. Danda, again, I like him, and when we signed him, I was very excited about his technical quality, about his ability, but it's not worked for whatever reason. It's not worked. Maybe the step up. I'm not completely writing him off because positionally, I don't feel like he was played where he should be, which we could say for a lot of our players. But I do feel like Danda and Spittle, if you're talking about them as wide players, which is obviously the graphic that we're looking at and the way they've been grouped into it, that's where they are. I don't think either of them are actually wide players, but I would still not shed a tear if either of them were sold. So I'm going to say sell both.
Interesting, Alan, because I would keep both. I think Derek McInnes and his management style, the system he likes to play, will get more of a tune out of both players, particularly Yandanda. I think we might see a lot more of that potential that we expected from him under Derek McInnes next season. Blair Spittle was one of the better players that we had this season up until at least kind of the first half of the year. I can see that. I can see him progressing even from there. He's not an old player. He's still not that old. I see more development still to come from Spittle, and I think that under McInnes he can improve even more. Keep them both.
I agree on that. I think for Blair Spittle, I think when you need to dig deep, and for one of a better phrase, if you need folk, was it in the engine room to actually keep it going. I think Blair Spittle kind of represents that, and I think he's been one of the better players throughout the season. And for Jan Danda, I don't think he's had a fair enough chance. Like as you aptly said, Alan, like he's not been played where he's meant to play. So I would keep both as well. And I mean, on that as well, I mean, he could sell one of them as well. Like, for all as much as we brought in the new, was it the Greek boy who, again, I'm not even going to attempt to say his name, but I have to take that into account as well. So interesting thoughts, boys. On the right side, if you don't mind, I will start this off as well. So we've got James the Forest, Drama, and Finlay Pollock. I would sell Drama. He's on contract till 2027. He's not been used much again, so I would probably sell him on, and he would probably be keen to get a move as well, in my personal opinion. Finlay Pollock, I would keep. Again, even though they didn't reach the top flight, I thought from what I'd read and what I'd seen, I thought he had a really good loan spell at the Wraith, and I feel as if he was another player that was a standout when he was getting the game time as well. So I would keep Finlay Pollock. I'm about to break Alan's heart here, but again, James Forrest, I'd say he's been a consistent player. I don't think he's been bad on any the kind of negative terms, but 1 year left on his contract. I don't see Derek the kind of extending that. So I'd say if you want to get something for him, and on the basis that we got him for a free, if you want to make some profit out of that, I would say sell
him. Fair point.
I'm sorry, Alan.
I'm gonna have a little cry. John, do you want to go next, and I'll console myself?
Yes. I am going to restore some of Alan's faith in humanity with a caveat. I would keep Alan Forrest for now. If we bring in Islam Chesnikov, I would sell Alan Forrest. He's useful, but is expendable. So that's kind of where I'm at with Forrest. I would keep him for now. If we do bring in Chesnikov, I would get rid of him. I would sell Drama. If we can get some decent money for Musa, I would do that. And I would keep Finlay Pollock. He's one of, I think, the best talents we have in terms of young players that's been coming through the last few years. And I really do think he deserves the opportunity to get a crack at the whip in the first team at Hearts.
Okay, fair enough. I will agree with you on Finlay Pollock. I think Finlay Pollock is my Harry Stone when it comes to Ewan. Finlay Pollock is a player that I have wanted to be involved in the first team at Hearts for quite some time, and he always just seems to have a little knock or a little injury, and he had quite a serious injury, I believe, quite early in his career, which kind of held him back a little bit as well. But he's fit now. He finished the season with an injury, but I believe he's fit now. And again, like I said about Macaulay Tate, I want Finlay Pollock to come back as somebody with that bit between his teeth, saying, right, this is when I prove myself, new manager, etc., etc. So I'd keep Finlay Pollock for that reason. Musa, I would keep, and that's probably a bit of a surprise to you both. I can see the look on Ewan's face that it's a surprise. I like Musa. I think there's definitely somebody in there that we've seen in flashes McInnes talked about wanting wingers that are direct and happy 1v1. And I think the flashes of Musa that I have seen, he does have that in his locker. He does have that in his game. Again, if there's an offer and if there's interest, because I believe there was interest in him from down south last season or in January perhaps, but it just never materialised. If there's decent interest, I could see a world where Musa leaves, but I would certainly keep him. And Alan Forrest, now I love Alan Forrest, everybody knows that. I've been waving the Craig Halkett flag with one hand and the Alan Forrest flag with the other. I think having players that are squad players, and we're sitting here going through every single player and talking about who we'd keep and who we'd sell. Alan Forrest is your ultimate squad player. And if he is happy to be that squad player, he can stay. Would I want him starting every week next season for Hearts? No, and it's not because I don't rate him, because I do. I think we need to aim for better. But if Alan Forrest is happy to be that reserve and sit on the bench and come on and make an impact when he can, or when he's given the opportunity to, then I'd keep him. And I just feel like, as well, like I said, McInnes likes his pacey wingers that can beat people 1v1. And I think Alan Forrest is the most direct winger that we have at the moment. Obviously, we've not seen the Greek boy in action yet. Chesnikov is another one that's probably not too far away. And I'm sure we'll sign some more wingers, and depending on who they are, my opinions might change. But for me, I will continue to bang the Alan Forrest drum for as long as possible.
Not a problem. When we get to the last two as well, obviously I'm not going to mention Shanklin because obviously we don't know what's happened about that, and we've talked about him long enough for this was it a season as well, and obviously we know that was it the Cabangus was permanently signed on a 3-year deal. So the only two that we have to go through is James Wilson and Vargas.
I'll take this one if that's all right. James Wilson, for me, keep. There's a lot of potential in that kid. He signed a professional contract terms till 2027. So we do have a little bit more time to work with him. I don't think the right time to sell him is now, unless there's ridiculous interest. Obviously, we know clubs down south can hoover up young talent from up here like it's nothing. So there could be a world where there's interest in him. We know there is or has been, but he chose to stay at Hearts. I feel like the best move for him right now is to stay and to see what Derek McInnes wants to do. I would keep James Wilson. And Vargas, he's contracted till 2029. I like him. I think there's flashes. I do think he's another player, like I spoke about, direct players that are pacey. McInnes has talked a lot about pace and energy in his team, and I think Vargas, when he's on form, brings that. But obviously all that stuff happened when he was doing international duty, speaking about the wanting to leave, etc., etc. So for that reason, I'd sell Vargas.
Yeah, I would also sell Vargas. I believe that the contract, much like what I said earlier with Jamie McCarthy, I think that contract is going to become an albatross the deeper into it we go. He hasn't shown anywhere near enough this season, I feel, to justify that 5-year deal. I feel he's a pretty lazy player. He is not justifying, in my view, that length of contract. So I would sell him. I would keep James Wilson from pretty much the same reasons that you said, Alan. There's not much to say there. He's a fantastic young talent, and he has proven that he can play at this level. I do think he needs to be spending more time on his development and less time on the pitch, ideally. But that'll depend on how we recruit going forward. I would keep James Wilson. I would also keep Liam Boyce, but that's been taken entirely out of my hands because they bloody punted him in January.
Absolute bastards, honestly, bastards. But just to kind of wrap this bit up, I would absolutely 100% keep James Wilson. Again, I think under McInnes, all that he can do is just progress from there. Vargas, again, I don't think he's justified a 5-year contract. I don't. So again, if we got the chance to sell them and to make our a cash back, I would sell them. So if you guys have any other views on those the players we just listed, we would love to hear them. And if you would love to play along with our last section as well for the quiz, please feel free to do so. So guys, apart from the last question, I'm going to give you 10 seconds to answer each the question. I want no phones, whatsoever, as per. So, as I said, guys, if you're all set to play along, let's do it. So, the question number one. In the last 3 seasons, how many goals has Lawrence Shanklin scored in total? And we'll see who can get the closest.
Are we writing them down or are we shouting them out? Sorry.
If you want to write them down, absolutely, and you can show it on screen.
66 goals.
I'm going
Alan?
60. I'm going 69.
Both very close. Alan was the closest with 68 goals in 3 seasons. Oh, very well done. Now, just to say, I got all my answers from Transfer Market as well. So if the answers are not right, fucking was it the fire at them? Question number 2. Last season, we officially sold the love of my life, the light in my heart, Scotland's pride, Andy Halliday. Obviously, we got him on a free because he was let go from the Rangers. But which club did Andy Halliday play for before he signed for Rangers? 10 seconds, guys.
Oh,
Was he at Livingston?
If you want to hazard a guess, they can do.
Livingston?
Don't know. I'm gonna just chuck out like a Andy Halliday. Where did he play before Rangers? I'm gonna go for like a Hamilton. I'll go Hamilton. I don't think it's right though.
No, so he was a youth player at Livingston, John. So you were on the right track, but no, he came from Bradford City.
Of course he did.
Okay.
Of course
Bradford
he did.
City.
Yeah,
So,
somewhere in the back of my head was that he had played for Livingston at some point.
Yeah, no. You're absolutely right, John. You're absolutely right. So throughout this season, we have obviously failed to beat any of the Old Firm or our counterparts, Hibs, this season. But which other team have we failed to beat this season? So we didn't beat Celtic, we didn't beat Rangers, and we didn't beat Hibs. But what other team did we fail to beat?
Motherwell?
Aberdeen.
2-0, Alan.
Fuck.
Come on.
It's all right,
despite being the better team and near enough every game we played against them. But by the by.
Very well done, Alan. John, you can still pull this back, mate. So the next the question, and this is another Shanklin related question. So Craig Gordon returned to Hearts in 2020 when we were demoted to the Championship. How many clean sheets to this day has Craig Gordon made throughout that time? 10 seconds to answer.
What, in the spell since he's come back?
Yes.
43.
Okay.
So complete guess.
I don't even know. I was going to say like 35 or something, but I don't know. It would be complete guess.
It'll be less than 43.
So John has gotten the closest. He has made 55 clean sheets since then.
Yeah. I should have had more faith in my boy, man. I should have said like 112 of them.
Right. So the next question, and I'm going to give you 60 seconds for this as well, okay? Recently surfacing from his submarine for the BBC online podcast Star of Hearts, which was Vladimir Romanov. Can you name me as many, so there was 12 in total, the 12 managers that was in charge of Hearts during Vladimir Romanov's reign? Now, there were 2 managers that had 2 different spells, right? I want you to name me as many as you can in that time. And whoever gets the most will get an extra point. And if you manage to get them like in order, even better. So I'm going to give you 60 seconds starting from now.
Right, I've got 7 and I'm out.
Okay, fair.
My mind's gone.
John, you got 5 seconds, mate.
I think I've got all the ones I'm going to get because there's one that I remember, but I don't remember his name. The mad 90-year-old Russian guy. But I don't even know if he was officially a manager. He was like part of that three-man team mind.
I am including caretakers as well. So, Alan, would you like to name all the ones that you got?
So I got 7, but I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. I just started rattling names down, to be honest. So I'm going to start with the one that I just want to swiftly move on from, Graham Rix, Ivan Auskis. I've got Csaba Laszlo. I've got George Burley. I've got John Robertson. I've got Paulo Sergio. And I've got Gary Locke. I don't know if Locke's time was...
Yes. No. He is still valid. Okay, John?
So I've got John Robertson, George Burley, Graham Rix, Valdis Ivanauskas.
Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't count John Robertson just because it was in the brand new era, like at that point. So I've technically not counted because it wasn't him that actually hired him.
Yeah, that's fine. Burley, cool. Rix, Valdis Ivanauskas, Stephen Frail, Jim Jeffries, Paulo Sergio, Gary Locke, Csaba Laszlo.
I can't believe I forgot JJ.
And I'm pretty sure Stephen Pressley was a caretaker manager at one point as well.
I think
how many was that?
So not counting Burley, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Very good effort, boys. Very good. So, Alan, can you give me back your answers?
So I went with Graham Rix, I went with Ivan Auskis, I went Csaba Laszlo, Burley, Gary Locke, and Paulo Sergio. I did have John Robertson down, but apparently he's not counting, which is fair.
So 6 for Alan. John, what'd you get, buddy?
So I, like Alan, had Robertson because he was in charge when Romanov took over, but he was quite swiftly booted. So first one under Vlad is Burley. From there, I've also got Rix, Ivanauskas, Frail, Jim Jeffries, Stephen Frail, obviously, Jim Jeffries, Paulo Sergio, Gary Locke, and Csaba Laszlo.
Very well done. See, look, you brought it back to 3-2. Extra point, we're getting more than Alan, fantastic value. Well, before we wrap things up and before I inject the fucking pressure that I saw you both with, which was fantastic, I will give you a rundown. So there was 14 the coaches in charge, and as I said, there were 2 managers that had 2 different spells. So I'll go over it quickly just for everybody else. So we had George Burley, the June 05, John Glynn, October 05, Graham Rix, November 05, Valdis Ivanauskas in March 06, Edward Malofeef in October 06, Eugenius Ryabovas in November 06.
Who?
Exactly. Valdis Ivanauskas in December 06, when he came back. And Toli, was it the Karabochka in March 07?
I know that name as well. I know that name as well. Oh,
Stevie Frail in January 08. Csaba Laszlo in July 08. Jim Jeffries in January 2010. Paulo Sergio in August 2011. John McGlynn once again in June 2012. And lastly, Gary Locke in February 2013. What a ride that was, eh? What a ride!
Can I lose a point for forgetting about Jim Jeffries and John McGlynn? Can I deduct myself a point for forgetting about those 2? That's embarrassing.
Absolutely not a problem. Not a problem. But
and the rest of them were bankers, lads. Absolute bankers.
How could you not mind that you Venus was it the Ryabovas?
think he must have been the captain of the submarine or something. Like, who's that?
When was he in again?
He was in November 06, so he was in charge for a total. So that was in between Edward de Malofeef and Valdas Ivanauskas returning.
Right. That was when Ivanauskas took his mental health break, and then Malofeev took over, but then he made 3 substitutions at half-time in his first game, and then he didn't last long because of that. He was just completely clueless and didn't speak any English.
And
so
I believe that was at Celtic Park as well, no?
I think you're right,
I'm putting it down to he was just the witch doctor's pal. Like, I'm sorry. that guy didn't exist. I'm sorry. That person did not exist.
Well, for everybody well, for everybody playing at home as well, we do hope you enjoyed that as much as me. And thank you very much for your efforts as well, boys. I do greatly appreciate it. But I think that brings us to the end of the podcast and for this season as well. As we said at the very start, it's been amazing just in terms of the progress of the podcast as well. It's been absolutely amazing for all the new subscribers, all the views as well. Honestly, from all of us, we do greatly appreciate it. Obviously, we will still keep active on all of the socials as well. We'll still keep firmly active on that, and then any new news that we hear as well, we will keep you up to date. From myself, honestly, it has been amazing. Even though I've not been on as much throughout the season, it's still been absolutely fab. The boys, if you want to have your words as well, please feel free.
Yeah, it's been great. Like we said at the start of this, what feels like a marathon episode. If you've lasted to the very end, fair play to you. You get a medal. But yeah, like you said, Ewan, it's been the last few months of the season have been a bit difficult for us in terms of all coming together and being a team together, and it's been tough, but we managed to keep going and get decent content out. And I'll say that as one of the people that makes said content, I'm really proud of it. Like I said at the start, hopefully going forward we can be together more often, because it certainly makes it a heck of a lot easier to put some decent content out there together when I'm with you guys, having a chat and having a laugh and just talking absolute nonsense, from my part at least.
Yeah, the podcast has, as we've mentioned before, Alan, been a bit of a therapy session for the two of us in the weeks that Ewan wasn't able to make it on. Ewan, though, we would be remiss if we didn't mention, although you haven't been on the show every week this season due to various things, you've always been in the background. You've been responsible for getting that show out at 5 p.m. every week. And I think that you deserve so many plaudits with everything you've been juggling for being able to do that. And next season, we're going to make it easier for you. The podcast is going to upgrade, and it's going to be even better than before. And hopefully we will have some bloody good football to talk about. Massive thanks to both of you for involving me as much as you have this year. Looking forward to spending more time talking with you. And again, just big thanks to everyone who's helped you guys' show grow so much this year, because it has been phenomenal to watch.
You're here, John. I couldn't have said it better myself, my friend. And going forward, we do hope to see you again soon. And as I said, we will keep you updated with new episodes for the future as well. And as I said, any new updates as well as we hear as we go along. So we do, from all of us, we do hope you have an amazing summer as well. And let's hope we get back to winning ways when we come back for the brand new season ahead. So from myself, Alan and John, we do hope you have a good one, and we will see you very, very soon. You all take care. Bye for now.